If you could turn to Luke chapter 4.
Luke.
Luke 4. Over the past few weeks, we've been studying Luke's Gospel on what we've called the Jesus Walk. So this week, I want to pause and look back over what we've learned over the last few weeks. Because too often, churches study the Bible verse by verse, and they miss the big sweep of the story from one end to the other. So we're going to start in Luke chapter 4. And after Jesus was baptized, he was tempted by Satan, and then he returned to Nazareth, which was his hometown, and there he launched his mission, what he was going to do. And Moji, can you read us Luke 4, verses 18 to 19?
روح خدا بر من است، زیرا مرا مأخذ کرده تا فقیران را بشارت دهم و مرا فرستاده تا رهایی را به اسیران و بینایی را به بینایان اعلام کنم و ستم دیدگان را رهایی بخشم و سال لطف خداوند را اعلام نمایم. آمین.
Amen. In English.
The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim the captives, that captives will be released, that the blind will see, that the oppressed will be set free, and that time of the Lord's favor has come.
So Jesus goes back to Nazareth, his hometown, and in the synagogue he tells them what his mission, what he's going to do. And how did the people react? They tried to kill him. In verse 28 to 30, when they heard this, the people in the synagogue were furious. Jumping up, they mobbed him and forced him to the edge of the hill on which the town was built. They intended to push him over the cliff, but he passed through the crowd and went on his way. So that's the first thing that happens. They tried to kill Jesus, and Jesus was rejected at Nazareth, and he just walks away. But now he moves on to Capernaum, which was Peter's hometown. And there Jesus casts out a demon in a man in the synagogue. And Luke tells us about it in this way. Do you want to read us Luke 4, verse 36 to 37?
نزد هیچ یک فرستاده نشد مگر نزد بیهوده زنی در شهر صرفه در سرزمین صدون. در زمان الیش نبی نیز جزامیان بسیار در اسرائیل بودند.
36 و 37.
4:36 to
داشتم
37.
میخوندم دیگه 36 و
نه
37.
20 خود.
آره.
Okay, do you want to read it in English?
مردم همه شگفت زده و به یکدیگر میگفتند این چه کلامی است. او با اقتدار و قدرت به ارواح پلید فرمان میدهد و بیرون میآید. بدین گونه خبر کارهای او در سراسر آن نواحی پیچیده.
Violet's going to read it in English.
Amazed, the people exclaimed, "What authority and power this man's words possess! Even evil spirits obey him, and they flee at his command." The news about Jesus spread through every village in the entire region.
So Capernaum is different from Nazareth. In Capernaum, Jesus is accepted, and the news about him begins to spread to all the other towns. And people are excited. And then we read that Jesus went back to Peter's house, where he healed Peter's mother-in-law. And Luke tells us that in verse 40, do you want to read it, Cameron? Luke 4, verse 40.
هنگام غروب همه کسانی که بیماری مبتلا به امراض گوناگونی داشتند آنان را در نزد عیسی آوردند و او نیز بر یک ایشان دست نهاد و شفایشان داد.
Okay.
چرا یکم بخونم؟
Okay, so in English it says, as the sun went down that evening, the people throughout the village brought sick family members to Jesus. No matter what their diseases were, the touch of his hand healed everyone. So in Nazareth, they tried to kill Jesus, but in Capernaum, they accept him. They start bringing all the sick people, and the whole town turns out to be healed by Jesus.
Why there's a two big differences between two cities?
I think maybe Nazareth, because there was a little boy there, they were too familiar. Jesus at one point says a prophet in his own town, he's not accepted. But the two towns are totally different. And in verse 42, 43, we read, early the next morning, Jesus went out to an isolated place. The crowd searched everywhere for him. And when they finally found him, they begged him not to leave them. But he replied, I must preach the good news of the kingdom of God in other towns too, because that is why he was sent. But in Nazareth, they tried to kill Jesus and he walks away. But in Capernaum, but they want to keep him, but they can't. He has other jobs to do. So he'd be living there, then he comes and goes, and he goes to different towns. When we're never told that he went back to Nazareth. But in Capernaum, he stays and he comes and goes. But next, Jesus healed a leper. What was it like to be a leper in those days? Who can remember the story?
You were an outcasted.
You had to live outside town.
They wouldn't let you live in the town. You had to wear rags. They shunned you. They pushed you
out.
away. They chucked you away. But when Jesus healed the leper, we read Luke 5, verse 14. Jesus tells the leper to do something. What did he tell him to do? Who's got a Bible there?
سپس به او امر فرمود به کسی چیزی مگو، بلکه برو و خود را به کاهن بنما و برای تطهیر خود قربانی‌هایی را که به موسی امر کرده است تقدیم کن تا برای آنها گواهی باشد.
So what? I'll read it in English. He said, go to the priest, let him examine you, take along the offering required in the law of Moses for those who've been healed of leprosy. This will be a public testimony that you've been cleansed or healed. Why did Jesus do this?
عیسی مسیح چرا مثلا به اونا گفت که برید با کاهنان صحبت کنید در مورد اینجور چیزا؟
There were two reasons. Once the priest had said he was healed, he would be allowed to move back. He'd be allowed to move among people. He would no longer have to wear rags. But there's another reason. The priests used to say that no leper had been healed in Israel since Elijah. And they said when Messiah comes, he will heal lepers. So it was like Jesus saying to the priest, look, Messiah's here. Lepers have been healed. It's starting to stir things. And then we read in Luke 5:15, the report of his power spread faster and vast crowds came to hear him preach and be healed of their disease. The news of Jesus is spreading faster and faster. The crowds are getting bigger to hear him. And the religious leaders, the Jewish mushroom heads, are beginning to get worried. They're beginning to take notice. And next we're told of a story when Jesus is teaching in a house. So who's got a Bible there? Luke 5 verse 17.
روزی از تعلیم میداد به فرانسیان و معلمان شریعت از همه شهرهای جلیل و یهودیه و نیز از اورشلیم آمده و نشسته بودند و قدرت خداوند برای شفای بیماران با او بود.
Can you read it in English, Viola?
One day while Jesus was teaching, some Pharisees and teachers of religious law were sitting nearby. It seemed that these men showed up from every village in all Galilee and Judea, as well as from Jerusalem, and the Lord's healing power was strongly with Jesus.
So we're told not just a few religious leaders, we're told it seems that these men showed up from every village in all Galilee and Judea, as well as Jerusalem. They've come from miles and miles away, and they traveled to try to trap Jesus in doing something wrong, breaking their law. And what happens is that some men make a hole in the roof, they lower their disabled friend down in front of Jesus, and Jesus says to him, your sins are forgiven. And the religious leaders are shocked. And they say, who does he think he is? This is Luke chapter 5, verse 21. Who does he think he is? That's blasphemy. Only God can forgive sins. And I think this was all quite deliberate on Jesus's part. He's forcing them to think. He's forcing them to ask questions. Jesus wants them to ask, who is this man? Luke tells us they asked themselves, who does he think he is? Well, who was Jesus?
God.
Who was Jesus?
God.
He was God, and he could forgive sins, and he could heal. And if the religious leaders had answered that question correctly, what would have happened?
Deliberately, they asked this question because they said no one can forgive the sin except God.
Yeah.
There's this man, and Jesus is a God, you know.
And what they're doing, they're saying, who does this man think he is?
He can't be God.
He can't be God.
Can't be God.
But if they'd have answered the question properly, what would have happened to them? Well, they would have become Christians.
Yeah.
They could have believed in Jesus was God. They would have changed them. They would have been happy. But I suspect what happened is they just became angrier and angrier because they didn't want to accept who Jesus was. Next, Jesus calls Matthew, Levi, a tax collector, to be a disciple. How were tax collectors thought of?
They weren't liked.
Nobody liked the tax collectors. They were hated. But Levi throws a mega party for all of his friends. And they probably included all his tax collector friends and all the rejects. And they all come to the party. And at this party, Jesus eats and drinks with these people. And the religious leaders question Jesus about his choice of friends. And he tells them the parable of the wineskins. We haven't the time this week. You'll find it on our YouTube channel, that teaching. But basically, Jesus was telling them that their religion was rubbish, that their religion was a waste of time. And so they're starting to get angrier and angrier. And last week, we saw how Jesus healed a man on the Sabbath day. And the religious leaders' anger started to boil over. And we read in Luke chapter 6, verse 11, at this, the enemies of Jesus were wild with rage, and they began to discuss what to do with him. So I want to read that in Farsi, Luke 6, verse 11.
اما آنان سخت خشمگین شدند و با یکدیگر به مشورت نشستند که با عیسی چه کنند.
And what I've tried to do to give you the big story, because sometimes we miss it, but we see that Jesus is becoming more and more popular with the ordinary people. But the religious peoples are hating him more and more. And he also seems to do things to make them think. He wants them to ask questions. So what do we learn? We learn that the ordinary people, the common people, love Jesus. And they follow Jesus. Not everyone does, but it's the common people, the rejects, the people that nobody wants, that love Jesus because he accepts them and they follow him. And we also learn that when people reject Jesus, as they did in Nazareth, he walks away to be warned. You can't keep rejecting Jesus. There comes a time when he just walks away. And he's calling the outcast, the ones that nobody wants, to follow him and be his friends. And when necessary, Jesus challenges the religious leaders about what they really believe. He does it to show them that their religion's rubbish, but he also wants them to change and believe in him. He's not just causing trouble, he wants them to come to him. So who in our lives, 3 last questions, who in our lives do we need to challenge about the truth of Jesus? Friends, people that don't know Jesus, we need to challenge them sometimes about. Also, sometimes we need to be wise like Jesus and walk away, not keep pushing. There are times when you just stop. But who are the outcasts in this world who need to hear about Jesus? I've come across asylum seekers in the past who were Muslims who've never actually had a proper conversation until I told them they're a Christian. People just reject them. Just, oh, they don't want to know. And the final question is, we need to make sure that we are true disciples, followers of Jesus. All of us need to do that, not to waste time before it's too late. And as I was preparing this study, God gave me a few Bible verses which I want someone to read in Farsi. 2 Timothy, Timotheus chapter 2. Second Epistle of Timothy chapter 2, 23 to 24. There's 2 Timothy.
اما مباحث پوچ و بیخردانه دوری کن، چرا که میدانی نزاع ها برمیانگیزد. حال آنکه خام خداوند نباید نزاع کند، بلکه باید با همه مهربان باشند و قادر به تعلیم و بردبار. امین.
25 باید
25 باید مخالفان را به نرمی ارشاد کند، بدین امید که خدا به آنها توبه عطا فرماید تا به شناخت حقیقت برسند. آمین.
Run from anything that stimulates youthful lusts. Instead, pursue righteous living, faithfulness, love, and peace. Enjoy the companionship of those who call on the Lord with pure hearts. Again, I say, don't get involved in foolish, ignorant arguments that only start fights. The servant of the Lord must not quarrel, but must be kind to everyone, be able to teach, and be patient with difficult people. Gently instruct those who oppose the truth. Perhaps God will change those people's hearts and they will learn the truth.
So that's how Paul tells Timothy how to live. And what I wanted to do today, just get the big story of, and this week try to read those chapters again, 3, 4, 5, 6, as Jesus starts to move and things start to happen. But here Timothy's saying, this is how you should live. If you want people to come and follow Jesus, this is how you should live.
I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back. Though none go with me, still I will follow. Though none go with me, still I will follow. Though none go with me, still I will follow. No turning